of you, either through other webinars or on our orientation day. I'm the director of Pre-Collegiate Outreach Programs here at WPI, and we are really excited this evening to welcome Jonathan Sparling, who is a director, associate director, I believe, right, at
Yep.
the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority. I'm going to let him tell you a little bit about what the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority does. And if you're not from Massachusetts, don't worry about that because he's going to talk pretty generally about financial aid and the financial aid process. And then certainly we're going to leave some time for questions. Like we always do with our webinars, we ask that you put your questions into the chat, and we will get those answered after Jonathan's formal presentation. But, feel free to put those in at any time as you go along when you think of them. So, Andreas, if you can make sure that we are recording the session, we will also make it available for folks afterwards on the Canvas site for Frontiers, and the students will have, or maybe on the YouTube channel. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Andreas. I think we've moved to YouTube for
We'll make it available for them.
We'll make it available. There you go. That's a safe way to say it. So, all right. So with that, I'm going to let Jonathan take over. Jonathan, did you have slides that you want to share, or are you going it without? Oh, okay. Perfect. Excellent.
Pull it up right now.
Excellent. All right. So I'll let you take it from there.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with everyone, Sue and Andreas. Excited to talk a little bit about financial aid and college financing this evening. As Sue mentioned, my name is Jonathan Sparling, serve as Associate Director of College Planning and Education at MEFA. I've been with MEFA for about 2 years now, and before that worked at another organization that did similar work with families and students around college financing and financial aid. And before that, I actually worked in the financial aid office at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. So full circle sometimes. So excited to be back and talking with folks. So a little bit about MEFA before we jump into the presentation. We are the not-for-profit state authority, been around since 1982, helping families plan, save, and pay for college and reach their financial goals. So we do this through a lot of outreach in the community, through partnerships that we have with colleges and community partners. And then certainly we have a lot of really great information about the entire college planning, financing, and education process on our website. So I won't go through everything that we have there, but you can see, go to our website, a lot of really good information. Call us if you ever have any questions. Follow us on social channels. And then certainly outside of this presentation, if there's any other topics you'd like to learn about or you want a refresher, we probably have a seminar or a webinar available to you to attend. So doing more webinars these days and not in-person events, as you can imagine. So everything that we have is free of charge, and so you can take advantage of it at any time. So tonight we're going to talk about financial aid and a little bit about college financing. So specifically, we're going to review the types and sources of financial aid. We'll talk about the application process, and we'll review the two most important forms that you will need to complete to apply for financial aid. We'll talk about how financial aid decisions are made and what colleges are looking at when it comes to those decisions. We'll talk about paying for college and some things that you should think of as you kind of transition into that step. And then we will end with some good resources. As Sue mentioned, keep those questions coming throughout, and we'll definitely have time at the end to answer those questions. So types and sources of financial aid. Well, before we get into that, just important to level set and talk about what is financial aid. So simply stated, financial aid is money to help students pay for college. And under this kind of large umbrella of financial aid, there's really three main types. So the first is grants and scholarships, and that's sometimes referred to as gift aid. So this is the good stuff, right? This is money that you get either based on meritorious accomplishments in high school or need-based scholarships, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And this is money that you do not have to repay to anyone. And so grants and scholarships are given to students and families as a way to offset and reduce some of the costs of going to college. So grants and scholarships come from a variety of sources. And again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. But a lot of times those grants and scholarships are coming from the college or university that you are applying to. The next main type of financial aid is federal work study. So this is a fund that you may be awarded when you apply for financial aid. And work study, the way that it works is that if you qualify for work study, that will be stated in your financial aid award letter or offer. And then when you get to campus, you will either be assigned a job or find a job, and you'll work in the financial aid office, athletics, the admissions office, and then you'll get paid much like a normal job. And so it is considered a form of financial aid because the funds from this are coming from the federal government. There's a matching portion provided by the institution. But again, federal work study is another source of financial aid. And then finally is federal student loans. And this is, the federal student loans or direct loans are loans that are available to students to borrow. And this is a loan that students, by the very nature of being enrolled in a college, can borrow. Obviously, you do have to pay that money back, but there are some, a lot of different repayment options associated with that, and a lot of good options for students who decide to borrow student loans. So I'd like to show this breakdown of where financial aid is coming from. This is taken from the College Board. They do a trends in student aid report every year. If you're looking for some light reading, you could certainly download it and go through. But this is from the 2018-19 year. So in total, about $187 billion awarded in financial aid. And you can see that 29% is in federal student loans. So again, that's a loan going directly to the student. But the good news is right behind it are these institutional grants, and scholarships would fall under that as well. We're just calling them grants here, as well as federal grants. And so, there are, and private grants as well at 7%. So the grants and scholarships, again, money you are not paying back. And so while the student loans is making up a big portion, right behind it are institutional grants, as well as federal grants and private grants as well. So those are the three types of financial aid. We talked about the three types: grants and scholarships, federal work study, and student loans. And really, I like to think of these next two as kind of the two categories. So merit-based aid is one major category of financial aid. So think of merit-based aid. It's awarded because of a meritorious achievement of the students in high school. So think about academic scholarships, think about because of artistic achievements or athletic scholarships, whatever it might be. Merit-based awards are awarded to a student by the institution, the college or university, because of something that they accomplished in high school. Again, could be based on SAT scores, certain, salutatorian, valedictorian, things like that. But a host of different ways that a student could qualify and receive a merit-based award. Merit-based awards might not be renewable at the particular college or universities. And even if they are, there are probably some renewable criteria. So if you are awarded a merit-based scholarship from the institution, you're just going to want to know what, if any, is the renewable criteria with that. It's usually tied to maintaining, satisfactory academic progress or maybe a GPA, depending on the college or university. Third bullet point, very important. Merit-based awards and merit-based scholarships are not offered at every college. And so this is a distinction that, when you're going through this, especially for the first time, you may see from certain institutions that they have merit-based scholarships and others will not. And they could be very similar institutions in terms of size, in terms of being private, in terms of the academic programs that they offer. But based on a variety of reasons, one institution may not offer merit-based scholarships or merit-based aid and another might. So just, kind of be aware of that as you go through. I can tell you from having worked at WPI, WPI is a school that offers merit-based scholarships. So that's one example, but certainly others in WPI's, category or realm may not. Sometimes a separate application is required. This would usually be for if it's a full ride merit scholarship or maybe a significant amount of money, that separate application may be required. So you just want to be aware of those deadlines. But for a lot of institutions that do offer merit-based awards or merit-based scholarships, if there isn't a separate application required, you will be reviewed for merit-based scholarship when you submit your admissions application. So by the very nature of applying to the school and being accepted, then you may qualify for a merit-based scholarship. And that's usually communicated to you upon the notification that you've been admitted. And so the institution might say you've been admitted and we're pleased to offer you a scholarship of $10,000 based on your academic achievements, whatever it might be. Application deadline may be as early as November, so just kind of keep an eye out for that. So that's kind of one category is merit-based aid. Now, another major category and kind of more of your traditional financial aid is what's called need-based aid. And need-based aid is really based on the family's financial eligibility or the family need. Need-based aid is determined by a standard formula, and that formula is calculated when you complete the FAFSA form or the CSS profile, but really driven by that FAFSA form. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Under the category of need-based aid, you're going to have both grants, loans, and work study. So that federal work study that I talked about earlier is considered a need-based form of financial aid. As I mentioned, most financial aid is need-based. And for need-based aid, you will have to maintain satisfactory academic progress in order to keep eligibility to maintain your need-based aid by the college or university. So just to kind of like think about it holistically, if you were to apply to an institution that offered merit-based aid, merit-based scholarships, as well as your traditional need-based scholarships, you would be reviewed and potentially get both. So you could potentially at some schools get a merit-based scholarship, a need-based scholarship, and then, federal work study, the direct loan, the federal loan that we talked about, and kind of both pieces of the pie. So that's kind of how it works. And we have a great slide later that kind of shows you how it all comes together. So we talked about grants and scholarships. We talked about, work study. Don't have a separate slide on work study, but, we can kind of get the idea of how it works. The last major piece of financial aid is the federal direct student loan. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the student is the sole borrower on this loan. There is no credit check required to borrow this loan. It comes in both a subsidized and unsubsidized portion. And so on the subsidized, there is a maximum limit that the student would be eligible for every year, and that's based on the financial need of the family. So although it's a student loan, student is a sole borrower, the eligibility is going to be based on the family's financial situation or the family need. For the 2021 year, the interest rate is fixed at 2.75%. That's the lowest that it's ever been on the federal student loan side, obviously given everything that is going on. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot of options when it comes to repayment. So no payments are due while the student is enrolled. There are multiple options once the student does graduate. Many are tied to income-based repayment plans. To give you an idea though, and I like to use this example, if you were, and you can see over here these annual loan limits of what you could borrow. This is a combination of both the subsidized and the unsubsidized amount. And let me just back up a little bit. The difference between the two. Subsidized portion of the federal loan, the interest does not accrue while the student is enrolled. Unsubsidized, it does. So that's kind of the major difference there. But back to that chart, those are the annual limits that a student could borrow, combining the subsidized and unsubsidized. And so if you added all of that up, you could see that the total borrowed for 4 years would be about $27,000. And you can see that an estimated repayment for $27,000 over 10 years would be about $300 a month. And so I like to use that as kind of a level set for students and families as they're thinking about, okay, I know there's costs associated with college. What am I looking at just from the federal, borrowing just those federal loans? It'd be about $300 per month over 10 years.
Jonathan, we have a question. I think
Of
maybe
course.
I'll just throw it right in right now. The question is, how are they determining eligibility? Do they consider the size of the family? So I'm guessing you're going to talk about family contribution at some point, but if you want to
Yeah,
just.
absolutely. No, I think that's a great segue because we're moving right into that. So yeah,
Okay.
there's a lot of factors that go into kind of determining the financial or the eligibility of the family. Income, obviously, of the family, assets, family size, number of children in college. So there's a lot of different inputs that you'll put into that FAFSA form that helps determine what is the financial need of the family. So yeah, good question. We'll definitely touch on that.
Thank you.
And so last slide in this section. So we talked about, kind of the major sources and the categories need or the need and merit base. So the last is just, excuse me, this slide talks about the sources of financial aid. Talked about types, categories, and now sources. So a lot of financial aid, and this kind of goes back to the chart. There is financial aid available through the federal government in the form of grants, work study, loans, certain tax incentives. So that's on the back end, talking about some of there's some interest deductions on student loans and things of that nature. So that's kind of more on the back end. But grants and work study and loans are really on the federal side. College and university is where a lot of that, or sometimes referred to as institutional aid. So that's where you're going to see a lot of those grants and scholarships coming directly from the institution. And that's, again, determined after you submit those forms to the school. Depending on the state that you're in, there might be some grants and scholarships, even tuition waivers available through your particular state. Obviously, Massachusetts has some of these set up, but those of you outside of Mass, check with your state agency for any opportunities related to this. And then lastly is other agencies, and this is referred to as our outside scholarships. A lot of different search engines out there, FastWeb, MEFA Pathway, we have one on our site. A lot of different ways to search for outside scholarships. We know that from what we've heard from students, they take a decent amount of time, but what we say is that if you can get a few here, 250, 500, 1,000, 750, they really can help reduce the cost of what you're paying. So I'm going to move right into the application process and hopefully address, some of the question that came through in terms of what's determining the financial need of the family, what's included on that form. So let's talk about the application process itself. So much like admission deadlines, financial aid timelines, very, very important. We always recommend having some type of spreadsheet or something where you're having both your admission deadlines as well as your financial aid deadlines. If you are planning to apply early action or decision at a particular institution, then often that is October or November timeframe, and so you're going to be looking at or trying to submit the FAFSA form, which we'll talk about in a little bit at the same time. The standard deadlines are typically in February or March. Please, whatever you can, try not to submit applications late. We know things happen, but do what you can to get that in on time for sure. We have a great, it's called our college application manager to stay organized. We just recommend that you use something. Spreadsheet is fine. So in order to apply for financial aid, two forms. One is required by every college, or 99.9% of colleges. The other is not. But the one that's required by most is, or if not all, is the FAFSA form. And so this is the free application for federal student aid. As we said, it's required by all colleges that are offering Title IV funding. And so those are going to be, again, pretty much almost every single college that you're applying to. The FAFSA form is going to ask for a variety of information. It's going to include basic demographic information about the parents and student. it's going to ask for parent and student income. And so for the 2021-22 FAFSA form, which is rising seniors, you would be completing the FAFSA form for the 2021-2022 year, right? It's going to be asking for 2019 income. And so this was a change that happened about 5 years ago. It's essentially going to be asking for prior year income information. And so the 2021-2022 FAFSA becomes available October 1st. And so by that time, October 1st rolls around of 2020, you're going to be completing it for the next year, but you're going to be using 2019 income information. So most of us will have our taxes done by then. In addition, it's going to ask for parent and student asset information. So cash, checking, savings, kind of basic stuff like that. It will ask for the household size, where the household size that the student is living in, and the number in college. And so, you know, if there's mom and dad in the family and one other sibling in college, and this is the student going to college, and you have one younger one, then you would put 5 in the households with 2 in college. Again, you would include both the older sibling that is enrolled in college and then the student that you're completing the FAFSA for. And then certainly you're going to list where the colleges where the student is applying, and that is how the information gets to the colleges. As I mentioned, the FAFSA becomes available October 1st, FAFSA.gov. You can complete the FAFSA on the My Student Aid mobile app. So this was something that was introduced a few years ago. And so, you know, I have it downloaded on my phone. You can start it on the phone, and you can complete it on the computer. Kind of a lot of different ways to do it. But the My Student Aid mobile app is where that you can complete through an app. Log in to the FAFSA form. You can get in, but for kind of the best way to do it, and really the way that you do an electronic signature, is with this FSA ID. If both the student and parent will need one. For any parents that submitted a FAFSA form for another student, then you will use the same FSA ID. If you forgot it, that's okay. There's a reset process and kind of everything that you can go through that. But both the student and the parent will need this FSA ID in order to complete the FAFSA form. We have a lot of the last thing I'll mention here is that there is the option to do what's called IRS data retrieval. So you're in the FAFSA form, you can actually pull some information from your completed tax returns and put that right into the FAFSA. It just makes completing a little bit quicker. So questions on the FAFSA form? I know there's a lot on this slide, but yeah, any questions?
There's a couple out there.
Sure.
So one that I see here is, do they take the parents' current student loans into consideration when determining eligibility or when filling out the FAFSA?
So debt is not reported on the FAFSA form. Only it's when you're talking about debt, it would just be in a. They do ask about any secondary properties, and so it would be, you know, kind of the net value of a home. But debt is not considered when completing the FAFSA form. Now, certainly, it's going to be a college by college decision if they will take that into consideration. But in terms of it actually being reported, it is not.
Mm-hmm. We have another question related to family members and where they're living. So if someone has a child who resides with the other parent, is that child then listed in their household as well, or is it just listed in the household of the other parent?
Sure, great question. So if there is a divorce situation or a separation situation, then when completing the FAFSA form, it's going to be the custodial parent. So it'd be the parent that the student lived with more over the past 12 months. If there's another student outside of the household, it comes down to a support test. And so let's say in this situation, the custodial family is, you know, a mom lives with student that's applying, and, you know, maybe mom and dad are separated, and the student's brother lives with dad. And so when submitting the FAFSA form, if dad is providing most of the support for the student's brother, then they would not be reported in the household. But if mom is, then they would be reported. So it comes down to a support test. And that's when you go through the FAFSA form, that's kind of outlined there, who should be included in the household.
Excellent. I just want to let folks know, if I don't answer your question yet, we will get to it. I'm just trying to keep things in line with Jonathan's presentation. So, so some of the questions I'm going to leave to a little bit later in the presentation. So,
Absolutely.
so I think we're good in terms of FAFSA questions.
Okay. We do a FAFSA webinar every year. We go question by question. It's riveting content, but it's you know, for the first time that you're doing it, if you need it, come to it. We will go question by question. And so that is available, again, free. You can come to it live. We also do a recording. And so, yeah, absolutely.
And that information would be available on your website, Jonathan?
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, one of the questions definitely that families are wondering is if they can get access to the links and the information you have in this presentation. So perhaps we can send them the presentation, or, yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
Absolutely. Yep, 100%. And we'll be doing each fall, we kind of re-up our family webinar series is what we call it. And so we'll do a webinar about the FAFSA, and we will also do one about the CSS profile, among other things. And so, you know, the FAFSA form is required by all colleges. The other major financial aid application that's required by primarily private colleges and universities is the CSS profile. I say that private colleges and universities primarily require this, but not all private colleges and universities will require it. So again, it's
WPI does.
WPI does, yes. So it's required by some colleges and universities. There is a fee associated with the CSS profile. It's $25 for the first school, $16 for each additional school. Like the FAFSA, it becomes available October 1st. And kind of a major difference that is compared to the FAFSA is that if there is a divorce or separated situation, the non-custodial parent will need to submit a separate profile. And so think about it, the FAFSA is concerned with the custodial family, kind of the family situation now. The CSS profile is looking at the biological family. And so if there is a divorce situation, then the non-custodial parent would need to, complete a separate CSS profile. The kind of the major difference between the two is that, you know, with the CSS profile, there's more ability for the colleges that utilize the form to add in some questions, some specific questions to their institution. It's going to ask a little bit more about income and asset information on that CSS profile. And, you know, it's more of a form that's driven by the participating colleges versus the FAFSA form that's a federal form, and it's kind of a one size fits all. So, you know, what I will say is that, you know, as you're narrowing down your list, be sure to check if the school requires the CSS profile. A lot of the information that you put in the FAFSA, you will be able to, you'll find that you're putting that in the CSS profile as well. We do a webinar recording every year on this as well. So much like with the FAFSA, we kind of do a deep dive into the CSS profile, and, you know, kind of go question by question more or less with this. And, you know, one of the reasons, in addition to a little more variability and control over adding some questions, you know, the CSS profile is really used by college and universities to determine their own institutional aid. And so, you know, if it's coming from endowments and they are awarding institutional aid, grants and scholarships, they're going to be utilizing the CSS profile to make sure that the money is going in the most accurate way. The final piece, some colleges will have an additional college financial aid application required by some colleges and universities. A lot of times this will be for upper class students. It might just be a renewal application, but just keep an eye on that. It's more rare, but the two big ones you'll see. So the FAFSA is every school, and the CSS profile. As you're building your list, make sure you kind of know or indicate who requires what.
We do have a couple of FAFSA and CSS profile questions. This one I'm not quite sure, so if the questioner would like to clarify a little bit, the question is how does it work with a step parent in the household? But I'm not quite sure what the question is there. So if that individual wants to share a little bit more specifically what the question is, that would be great. In the meantime, do you know specifically where on the FAFSA form you would be able to write down the information about the 529 plan if you have one?
Sure. So the 529 plan, that is going to be reported as a parental asset. And so it's going to ask for, one of the questions it's going to ask about is asset information of the family. And so the 529 plan is going to be considered a parent asset and not a student asset. And so as you're completing that, you will see it's going to ask for all, asset/investment information, and it says include the total value of 529 plans. And so that's going to be reported right on the FAFSA form. It's not reported as a student asset, which is actually more advantageous because parental assets are, I guess, counted less in the formula.
Okay, great. So we have a little bit of clarification on the step parent. We have two non-custodial parent questions. So the first one is, with regards to a step parent, does the financial aid form ask for their income or is it only based on the legal guardian?
Sure. So if there is a step parent in the household, then it's going to be it's going to be asked for both. So that custodial family is going to include that step parent. And so, yes, that's
very good. Thank you.
Now, what I will say, just a quick caveat. So if it's a school that uses the CSS profile, when they're reviewing, they're not going to include the step parent as well. So they're not going to be looking at custodial parent, step parent, and non-custodial biological parent. They're going to take out the step parent. So you're not going to be counting 3. It's going to be 2. So just a quick caveat there.
Excellent. And then this might be different for every institution, but you can let us know what you know. How do you navigate the CSS profile if the non-custodial parent is estranged or you can't get access to the non-custodial parent?
It's a great question. So you're absolutely right. Each institution will treat that differently. There is a non-custodial parent waiver form. And so, colleges are certainly aware that there are estranged relationships and you can't get contact with that individual. And so the college will either have you complete a non-custodial parent waiver form. A lot of times they will ask for someone that or in the community to confirm the relationship, confirm that there's not a relationship. But yeah, that's going to be a school-by-school decision when it comes to waiving that NCP, that non-custodial parent profile.
And for WPI, we do ask for a waiver form, so so that you're aware. And then, does the CSS profile need to be redone every year?
Great question. So again, institution to institution, many schools will only require the CSS profile the first year. I believe that's still how WPI does it, or it might be every year now. It was only 1 year when I was there. So yeah, a lot of schools, it's just going to be the CSS profile before the freshman year, before your first year. And then you're filling out the FAFSA every year. And then maybe that supplemental form, that financial aid form. Other schools will require you to do the CSS profile every year. So it's going to be school by school.
Excellent. If the 529 account is not with the parents, but with the grandparents, how is that reported?
So the value would not need to be reported if it's with the grandparents. However, if and when those funds are paid to the student, there is a question, or paid on behalf of the student to cover tuition costs. There is a question on the FAFSA form under the student section that says bills paid on behalf of the student. And so in subsequent years, you would enter the value paid through the 529 in that section for students. And so you wouldn't have to report it as an asset when completing it, but in subsequent years, it's going to ask were any bills, I forget the exact language of the question, but it says bills paid on the student's behalf. And so that's where you would report the 529 funds paid out by a grandparent or a aunt or uncle or whatever it might be.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you. And then this is great. Some great questions coming in here. So if the step parent is the second parent on the FAFSA that's being considered, and they are paying child support, is that listed on the FAFSA? Is that considered on the FAFSA?
That is a great
Testing.
question. I know that child support is listed on the FAFSA. That particular one, I'll be honest with you, I don't know.
Okay.
I would say that you can. Here's what I would suggest. I would go and look right at the. I always have a handy dandy like printout of the FAFSA
Yeah.
form, and so I would go and you can look at the specific question. That's a great one. I don't know off the top of my head.
Hmm. And for we have a question about at WPI who would be able to testify to the waiver that can confirm the estranged non-custodial parent relationship. I will get back to you on the answer to that because I want to make sure that I'm giving you the right answer. Typically, I think it can be a wide variety of individuals. Oftentimes perhaps a school guidance counselor or teacher or someone who knows the family outside of the immediate household. But let me just verify that for you so that we can make sure that we have the right answer.
Perfect.
All right, I think we're good for now.
Okay. So what happens after you apply? The colleges that you listed on the CSS profile, as well as the FAFSA form, receive the data electronically. From the FAFSA form, the student will receive what's called the Student Aid Report, or SAR, by email. They'll get a notification that they have this. Check that SAR. If you entered in an extra 0 in your income line, it can obviously make a big difference in eligibility, so always check that. You're going to want to contact the financial aid office with any special circumstances. So again, something that wasn't reported on the FAFSA form, something that you wasn't captured, something that has changed since you submitted the forms. Contact the financial aid office with any special circumstances. Colleges may request federal verification documents. We won't go into this too much, but basically verification is a process where the colleges have to confirm that what was submitted on the FAFSA form matches what was filed in your taxes. And so if you are flagged or selected for verification, you're going to want to do what you can to get that information that's requested in as soon as possible. And then, once this information is in, the colleges will review applications and determine financial aid award. So if you think about it in terms of a cycle and what's happening, students are applying to school kind of, depending on if they're EA1, EA2, ED, or regular decision, they're kind of applying all the time. They are going to be reviewed for admission first. And then assuming that the student is admitted, then kind of happening simultaneously, their file, electronic, is then kind of moved to the financial aid office. And assuming that all of the information is in, you've done your FAFSA. If the CSS profile is done, you've completed that. Assuming all of that information is in, then you will be reviewed for financial aid through the financial aid review process. And so it's very possible that you may receive a letter of admissibility that you were admitted to a school. And if the school offers merit money, they might say, hey, congratulations, you've been accepted. As part of this admission, we'd like to offer you X amount in a merit scholarship. They might call it some other type of scholarship. And then maybe a week or two later, you'll get a separate notification from the financial aid office. So some it'll happen separate, some it'll happen together. But again, it's all about that timing and timeline. So do what you can to get that information in as quickly as possible. Okay, so let's talk about how financial aid decisions are made. Again, this is high level. It's going to be a little bit different at every institution, but this is kind of the basic outline and how schools are going to use the data and use somewhat of a standard formula. So it all starts with the cost of attendance. So this is the total expenses for 1 year of college. So included in COA is tuition and fees and room and board. Those are considered billable expenses because, again, when you get the bill, you're going to see costs for tuition and fees and room and board. Those are billable expenses. Non-billable expenses or indirect expenses are going to include books and supplies, transportation, personal expenses. These are things that you're not going to see on the bill. Like you're not going to see a $500 charge for transportation, but it's built into your cost of attendance so that a family can either get financial aid up to that amount, or if they need to, borrow up to that amount and utilize funds in a refund to pay for these expenses. So tuition and fees, room and board are billed expenses, books and supplies, transportation, personal expenses are going to be non-billed or indirect. So it all starts with the cost of attendance. And then what's considered next is that expected family contribution. So the definition of the expected family contribution is the amount family has the ability to absorb for 1 year of college costs. Now, the expected family contribution is calculated after you put all that information into the FAFSA form. So again, thinking back to what we just talked about, you're putting in parent information, you're putting in student information, income information, asset information, number in the household, number in college, all of that information is utilized to calculate the expected family contribution. It's the same federal formula used for every family. So everyone that does the FAFSA, it's the same formula. Obviously, the inputs are different. The inputs are different. Some colleges are going to also use what's called an institutional expected family contribution. So this is a little bit into the weeds, but that CSS profile is also calculating an institutional expected family contribution. And again, that's what colleges are going to use if they are awarding their own grants and scholarships from their school, from their endowment. A family does have the primary responsibility for paying not only the EFC, but in a lot of cases, money in addition to the expected family contribution. And it is important to know that the EFC is not necessarily what the family will pay, what you will pay, and we'll highlight an example in a little bit. We have really good calculator on MEFA.org, and you can, if you would like, the EFC formula, kind of what goes behind it, and the tables and the charts are published. That's public information. So ifap.ed.gov, when you start in financial aid, they make you do hand calculations, which is how it used to be done before, computers and all that. And so you see kind of how everything is impacted and what drives that expected family contribution for a particular family. And then so kind of the basic formula, and I put that in quotes because obviously there's a lot that goes into it, is you look at that cost of attendance, and then you're going to subtract that expected family contribution, or that EFC, and what you're left with is your financial aid eligibility. And then colleges are going to fill in financial aid eligibility with financial aid from all sources that we spoke about earlier, whether it's from the federal government, from the state, or whether it's from the institution itself. So as you're going through the process, you're going to notice, wow, I get all these financial aid offers and they look very different. And they're going to look very different because for a variety of reasons. Number one, colleges cost different, right? And so, this chart just shows your EFC stays with you and it stays the same. So if your expected family contribution is $5,000, the cost of attendance is going to be the variable. So at college A, B, C, and D, you can see very quickly that your eligibility is going to be greater, your financial aid eligibility at college A versus college D. College D is probably a community college. College A is going to be a private institution. So that's kind of the difference, is that, the EFC stays the same, but the cost of attendance is changing, so your eligibility changes. And then, beyond that, it comes down to kind of awarding parameters and institutional priorities of the individual institution. And so just to kind of drive this point home in a visual, and we've had this slide for a number of years, this is the barrel slide, but let's pretend that the cost of attendance is $45,000 at a particular institution. So right at the bottom of the barrel, we're going to put the EFC of $5,000. So again, that's that we do COA minus EFC. So for this family, the financial aid eligibility total is $40,000. So on top of that EFC, let's say this student was awarded a grant of $17,500 and a scholarship of $9,500. And so these could both be from the institution. The grant could be the need-based grant, and maybe the scholarship is a merit-based grant, or merit-based scholarship, excuse me. And so this school happens to do both. So they received a scholarship as well as a grant from the institution. Student loan on top of that. So the student loan, again, $5,500 for first year is right on top, considered a form of financial aid. And then for this particular student, they received $2,000 in work study. Now, an important point about work study is because it's an earned fund, it's not going to come off the bill, right? You're going to get to campus. $2,000 basically means you can earn up to $2,000 in work study. So if you're a quick add, you will know and you will see that the 5 plus the 95 plus the 17.5 plus the 55 plus the 2 does not equal 45,000. And so what you're left with is what is called unmet need. And so unmet need is essentially the difference between the cost of attendance, the difference between the cost of attendance and EFC, or the difference between the financial aid eligibility and what the school is offering, is that unmet need. And so for this particular situation, this family, unmet need and the EFC is going to be the family's responsibility when it comes to paying. And then, you know, on the back end paying, it would be the student loan. The student would be responsible for paying. Most colleges and universities, and you will see this when you get your financial aid offers, do not meet full need. So that term meet full need is something that comes that you may hear. Most colleges are going to have what's called an unmet need. Certain colleges do meet full need, and so if your financial aid eligibility is 40,000 at a school that meets full need, you will get financial aid to equal 40,000. Schools that have very large endowments and schools that are allowed to do or allowed to that have the ability to do that, you know, will. A lot of colleges, most colleges, you will be left with unmet need or a gap. Sometimes it's referred to as a gap in your financial aid offer. And so when you are comparing, it's really important, you know, we talk a lot about, you know, certainly the school has to be a good academic fit, a good social fit. It has to be what the student wants to do. You know, my background and what we do at MEFA, we talk a lot about the right financial fit and really having some honest conversations about what the family is willing to take on from a financial perspective. And when it comes to that unmet need, for a lot of families, that's where you are either taking some from savings, which would be great, but a lot of families are borrowing some additional money in private loans. And so, you know, and this is obviously very straightforward, but you can see important to compare award letter to award letter because, you know, in this case, you're seeing that the cost of attendance at college A, B, and C, 45,000, it's the same, which, you know, for simplicity, we're saying it's the same. The EFC stays with you. So your eligibility is going to be the same at every college, you know, again, that 40,000. But you can see that clearly one college from a financial standpoint is a better deal than the other, right? College A is offering 32,500 in grants and scholarships. College C offering 17,500. Of course, your sons and daughters are going to want to go to college C, and that's kind of how it goes. And so, but you know, that's kind of where it comes into thinking about what are we willing to take on as a family. And so you can see kind of the difference in unmet need. So just because the school has the same cost of attendance doesn't mean the aid offers are going to be the same. Similarly, even if the total that you receive in financial aid is the same from institutions, let's say the net total is the same, which again, won't ever happen, but for simplicity purposes, you can see that in this scenario, again, every college has the same cost of attendance. Certainly one college, again, is a much better deal from a financial standpoint, whereas, you know, College C is going out and offering or suggesting that you borrow a parent loan for almost $30,000. So, you know, you're doing this already. I'm sure you're probably looking through it and you're talking to friends and you're kind of going through and you might have other students that went through. But this is, when it comes to a comparison, it's very, very important to look at as much of an apples to apples as you can. And, you know, also what I will say is that, you know, it's because the aid letters, because the offers vary from institution to institution and the types of aid offer, don't necessarily turn away from a school or a college that has a high sticker price, right? So that it has a high published price or sticker price, that's what we call it. Because it is very possible that an institution that has a high sticker price or a high published price, once you factor in all of the financial aid, may be a better deal than an institution that has a lower sticker price but isn't offering as much financial aid. And when I say better deal, I mean a better financial deal only. I understand, and we understand, that there are many factors that come into this, but from a purely dollars and cents, it's important to make sure that you're doing an apples to apples comparison and submitting those forms. So questions here. The last section is kind of quick, so I don't know if you want me to breeze through it and then we can take questions? Because I saw a few come through. Up to
Yeah,
you,
we
Sue.
do. We do have some questions. Why don't you go through this though? Because I want to make sure that that you get a quick chance to share this, and then we'll go back and hit all the questions that we can. So.
Perfect. So let's talk a little bit about paying for college and filling the unmet needs. So a lot of families will approach it with a combination strategy. So let's say the balance due is 20,000. They might look at both student and parent savings. So that totals 5,000. We call present income would be contribution to a payment plan. So a lot of institutions will offer a payment plan. In this case, you're going to contribute 5,000, and then future income would be taking out that educational loan. So we could do a whole section on alternative loans or private loans. We won't. We have plenty of information and a lot of webinars on what you should consider and think about if you indeed get to that point when you're thinking about taking out a private loan. And then just some additional financial considerations. Would starting at a community college save significant money? The answer is yes, it would. Is that the right path for you? Considering the number of children you'll be sending to college, if this is 2 of 3, what do you feel comfortable taking on from a borrowing standpoint? If this is one and only, might not change that equation. Thinking in terms of total enrollment, 4+ years, I would have many conversations talking with families that were only thinking about year 1. Think about year 2, 3, and 4 at least, right? Total debt, 4+ years, and what you're looking at from a debt perspective. Thinking about post-grad plans, is the student considering graduate school? And then making sure that you're comparing each school's net price. Again, the net price is going to be what is the cost of the school after financial aid has been applied. So in quick slides, financial aid office, they're a good resource. Talk to them. Many schools you'll be assigned a financial aid counselor that may stay with you. It may change. Ask about details. Attend the open houses and orientation programs, even if they're virtual. Go to them. Talk to folks. Ask questions. They're there to help. Contact with any special circumstances. Check for what is the preferred method of how to contact the aid office. Is it through in-person meetings, phone call, email? Is it filling out a web form to have a conversation? Again, just making sure that you're connecting with them early and often. Forgot to take out this top bullet point. We don't have an evaluation, but sign up for our emails so you can, we will send you good email content relevant to your son or daughter, their year. And so you'll get a lot of really good information. Sign up, check out what we have for additional events and information. Again, pretty much everything online. Connect with us on social. That's where we put relevant information. We do something where we try to put different scholarships out there as well through social. And so you can apply for those, or your sons or daughters can apply for those. So we'll take some questions, and there is our contact information right there.
All right, excellent. So we've got a bunch of them now.
Sure.
So this is a quick one. Is EFC calculated every year?
Yes. So every year you submit the FAFSA form that the EFC will be recalculated. For a lot of families, for most families, it's going to stay pretty much the same year to year, unless there was some significant change in the income situation. But again, it would be 2 years prior income information.
Right. So when do you usually find out how much a college is going to offer you? Does that happen on acceptance or afterwards?
Great question. So typically it's going to be after you submit and get the financial aid offer from the financial aid office. So what you may see is if it's a school that you were accepted to that offers merit-based money, upon getting the acceptance, you may see what you're being offered from a merit standpoint. So again, you're accepted to the school, and we also want to offer you a $10,000 merit-based award. But it's only after you submit the financial aid forms and you're reviewed for financial aid by the financial aid office that you're going to know your true net price, which is why we encourage you, we know that the focus is on getting admissions applications in, as it should be. That's the first step, but try to do that FAFSA and CSS profile as you're doing the admissions forms.
Yeah. Excellent. And then do you know, Jonathan, how public college endowment information typically is for determining the purpose of financial health of the college?
Yeah, I mean, there's some of that information is available. Some public colleges have, obviously they get funding from the state, but some have started their own endowments and they've been growing them for years. I know Worcester State has one. And so, in addition to funds that they're getting from the state, they are also kind of growing their own endowment. So yeah, I think public colleges and universities are starting to, some are, not all, kind of grow endowments as well to hopefully offset some of the costs. So really it's going to be on a college by college basis.
So, and I'll just add to that.
Yeah,
most colleges would feel would want you to know that they have a healthy endowment,
yes,
right? That they have
right.
a strong endowment, because obviously you want to be sure that they're a solid school. So that's a good question. I will tell you, I just did a quick Google search, WPI endowment, and it comes up first thing. So
there you go. So it's
feel free to go ahead and do that. So
that's good to know.
So here's an interesting question. I have not heard this. Maybe you have. I heard that if your child takes a college-level course while in high school, this can negatively impact financial aid. Is this true?
I have not heard that one as either. I'm trying to think of a scenario where that may be true, and nothing is coming to mind. So I have not heard that one off the top of my head.
I would actually say almost the opposite, that it would be an advantage or a benefit for your student if they got credit for that course, because that may allow them to either have other openings in their schedule to take other things, or perhaps to finish early. So I can't think of an instance at WPI where that would be a problem. So.
Yeah, and I can't either, but I can certainly look into it and ask some colleagues if they've heard that. So
yeah. And then here's a good question about if a child receives a full scholarship, a full merit scholarship, do they still have to fill out the FAFSA?
So they don't. However, what I will say is that depending on what the full scholarship covers, the full merit scholarship covers, it may be of advantage for you to complete that, simply because depending on where your expected family contribution is and what the additional need is, a lot of times those full ride scholarships may not cover room and board. And so it is, again, that's going to be included in that cost of attendance number. So yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on the particular institution. You certainly don't have to, but we always encourage you to complete the FAFSA form because, again, you may be eligible for some additional money. So it comes down to how is a full ride scholarship defined.
Right. So, and then we had a question earlier that if you're not planning on applying for financial aid, do you need to fill out the FAFSA? I know from WPI's perspective, if you want any loans, if you're planning on getting any federal loans, you do have to fill out the FAFSA, even if you're not interested in other forms of aid. So.
Yeah. So right. Exactly. So you would, if you're planning to borrow that, you would. The other thing you would have to do is that, and we talked a little bit about alternative loans, but one of the loans that parents can borrow is called a PLUS loan, a parent loan for undergraduate students. And so if you did want to borrow that loan, you would have to complete a FAFSA form. But I mean, you certainly don't have to, but yeah, I mean, if you want the student to borrow the loan and have a little skin in the game, you do have to complete the FAFSA form.
Excellent. So we're coming right up on 7 o'clock. I have a question here in the queue, and I think we can give folks, if anyone has one more question, I'm happy to take that. But this one is, does an applicant receive the financial aid package prior to deciding which school they will attend?
Yes. Yep. So you will get you'll go through the admissions process, you'll be admitted to the school, and then again, assuming that you complete the FAFSA form and CSS profile. So if you do your part and get everything in, then yes, you will know your full financial aid offer, including any merit and need-based financial aid before making a decision.
Excellent. So I don't see any more questions, so I think we're right on time here. So I am going to thank you very much, Jonathan, for being with us tonight, and let folks know, as we mentioned, we'll definitely get this presentation out to you in some format after after this evening. It'll take us usually a couple days, but lots of nice comments about how this was helpful, Jonathan. So thanks very
Perfect.
much.
Well, thanks everyone, and
Thanks,
have
everyone.
a great evening.
All right. Thanks again. Thanks for being with us.
Bye-bye.